So good morning, everybody. It's good to have people here early on Sunday morning. I want to introduce our special guest. It's in the context of February being Jewish Disability Month. So I'm going to ask people to mute themselves, please, so that we don't have extraneous noise. So Jewish Disability Month is to draw attention to, really being inclusive of people who have disabilities. So the Religious Action Center of the Reform Movement of Judaism has planned a whole month of educational sessions. And then we had a service on Friday dedicated to the subject. And then today we have the special guest, Cantor Puzarne, who has spent a lot of years developing an expertise in training people with disabilities. A few years ago, he saved his disabled cousin, who was blind with difficulties speaking and walking, from depression and neglect by working with him. And eventually he worked with him to become a bar mitzvah. And this poignant story is told in a 10-minute video, which we're going to share with you in a moment, but I want to say a few more things about Cantor Puzarne. Under the auspices of his 501c3, which is called BRIA, he's created a new project called the Sacred Bridge. The goal is to develop a consistent vehicle through which more than 20 years of lived experience can be shared with special needs parents and professionals in the US, who could, of course, benefit from this knowledge. Separate but related is to facilitate these families visiting Israel-Palestine, since all too often they're ignored by the travel industry. Amazingly, right on his kibbutz in Israel is an Israeli man who runs Paratrek, that allows physically disabled folks to enjoy the same tourist sites taken for granted by the regularly abled. By building on the kibbutz and moshav model, Israel is now at the forefront of providing developmentally challenged adults with long-term quality of life options that are simply not available in the US, which is still way too dependent on the group home model. So I'm going to share with you the little film. We also have the director of the film, Jared Stein, with us this morning.
Before you do, I'd just like to say a few words, if I might.
Sure, of course.
I want to share a few anecdotes. One of the names of our organization is Vision of Wholeness, which is an acronym, and I love acronyms. For a shorthand for Vision of Wholeness is VOW, because what it means is those of us who adopt the Vision of Wholeness model take a vow to see the capacities and the strengths of every human being. And in a few minutes, I'm going to invite Quinn to sing a song called B'Tselem Elohim, which talks about the fact that all human beings, according to our religious traditions, are created in the image of God. Now, one of the difficulties that people with various disabilities have is that people hyper-focus on their shortcomings. And it's well intended because they're trying to fix problems. And yes, there are problems. But what I became very aware of is what would it be like to be on the receiving end where everyone is always trying to fix you. Everyone is always trying to point, to expend energy on what's lacking. And I'll tell this very quick anecdote. Some years ago, Quinn and I were invited. I was invited, and I brought Quinn along to do a presentation at a very prestigious medical center. It's called Cedar Sinai, which many of you are familiar with. And at the time, they don't anymore, they had a unit for child psychiatry. And it just so happened, Jewish geography, small world, the director of that program was someone whose daughter I had trained for bat mitzvah in Santa Monica years before. So I was having a conversation. I'm going to tell this story, not to kind of like be pejorative, but just to kind of point out what we're moving away from, if you will. And the doctor, who, as I said, I knew, was telling me, she pulled me aside because she knew that I worked with people with autism. And she said to me, we had an assessment today for a 10-year-old boy. And she said it was quite amazing. And I said, so tell me, what was so amazing about it? She said, well, one of my interns who I'm training to do this work was in charge of the assessment. So I said, tell me more. She said, well, we watched the boy we watched the boy through one of these, I guess it's called a one-way mirror. They could see him, he couldn't see them. And she said, after about 10 minutes, this very talented young intern turned to her and say, okay, doctor, I don't need to see anymore. I can already see what's wrong with this child. So me being me, approaching things from a spiritual rather than a clinical point of view, got right in her face. And I asked her this question: how long would it have taken that very gifted intern of yours to see what was right with that child? And without even batting an eye, she said, that's not what we do here. She didn't hesitate, and I appreciated her candor, but that in a nutshell is everything. Because the question comes up, if it's not their job to see what's right with the child, and it's not the occupational therapist, and it's not this therapy, whose job is it to see what is right, not wrong? And what does it feel like to never have anybody in a position of power see what's right with you? And it became so obvious to me that, they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Of course, everybody wants to help. But what was right underneath the surface is the cumulative impact of an entire life of everyone interfacing with your deficiencies. And I can tell you, anybody who was subjected to that would not feel very good about themselves. And I don't care who you are. And this is why we created Vision of Wholeness, to begin to create a shift in consciousness, to kind of let go of everything you've been told, everything you believe to be true about disabilities, and begin to flip things to put the focus away from what I call a mob mentality, model of brokenness, to a vow mentality, vision of wholeness. And of course, in terms of my story, my entire skill, my entire orientation to this came from the fact that my cousin, who was only a few years younger than me, was born with severe, severe challenges. So for me, it's not something I learned in school. It's not something I learned in a book. It's just something I learned the way a person learns a language at a very, very young age. And so when you watch this movie, and we'll let Jared say a few words before. Jared, would you rather speak before or after the movie?
Probably before.
Okay. Jared was the very gifted filmmaker that created this. And what I'd like you to do when you watch the movie, some of you may be watching it a second time, is to see how I was governed by a wholeness mentality when everyone was telling me that Larry was too broken, too depressed, too physically ill, too debilitated to ever get out of that bed. But that's not what I saw when I looked at him. And that's what allowed me to overcome the constant voices that were trying to stop me from doing what I did. So I just wanted that kind of background. And Jared, could you share a little bit about your experience of making the movie and why you made it?
Yeah, so this was a film we made about 5 years ago, almost exactly. And Steve was able to use music and his dog to do what everyone was saying that was impossible to do, which was to get Larry out of bed. and able to do things in the world, to go out. And was I went to film with Steve. I did a lot of interviews with him. We went to a lot of different places that he would take Larry, and yeah, I got a lot of footage from that to put together into this story that we're about to watch right here. And there, Steve also had a lot of things that he had shot over years and years of footage of Larry that I shot some stuff of Larry, such as the bar mitzvah, and going to visit him at this therapeutic living center, and we'd go on walks, and all this footage was put together into this documentary.
And I will tell you that in terms of low tech, much of the footage that I contributed to Jared was filmed on my my very old BlackBerry phone. And I had Larry on one hand, Emma, the dog, on the other hand, and maybe I don't even know how I managed to balance all of this, but we were given, Ezrat Hashem, with the help of God. And it's a very important movie. And it's worth noting, by the way, that therapeutic living centers for the blind, which had become kind of a prison for him, actually was started by Larry's parents, because there was no place for people who were both multiply handicapped and blind. But there is a line from the Passover Haggadah. I don't remember it in Hebrew, but in English, it is, arose a Pharaoh who knew not Joseph. And when Larry's parents and a lot of the founders passed away, a whole new regimen came in, bureaucrats, bean counters, risk managers, and suddenly the whole spirit, and we talk a lot about it's the spirit that really makes the difference. We talk about the spirit of people and the spirit of places. Suddenly this place that was so infused with the enthusiasm of the founders, as those people got old and passed away, it became a very, very bureaucratic place. And one more anecdote before we go. When I told the people at the TLC, Therapeutic Living Centers for the Blind, that it was my intention to help Larry return to the person, I remembered him because I grew up with this. I had an advantage. I had seen him when he was young and when he would swim and he would joke and he would talk, before he had become so depressed. And people assumed that he was physically incapable of getting out of bed. The truth is that because it was a vicious circle. Because he never got out of bed, of course, he lost strength. Anyway, to tell you that when I said to the powers that be, I'm going to do everything I can to get Larry back to life and out of this bed, the director said to me, we don't want you to get him out of the bed. And I said to them, how could you possibly not want him to get out of that bed? And they said, well, because he's very frail. And I said, of course he's frail. He's been in bed for 2 years. And they said, well, if he gets out of bed, he might fall and hurt himself. And I said, if he doesn't get out of bed, he's going to die, which was true. He had endless infections. They were rushing him to the ER every 3 or 4 days, because what happens when you lie dormant for years? Your immune system breaks down. Anyway, they said, we just think it's better for him to stay in bed. And I looked at them and I said, it's better for you. It's not better for him. So these are two examples of institutional, we talk about institutional racism. This is institutional, what's the word, prejudice and demeaning of the rights of people with disabilities. And what needs to change are not just rules you can change. What needs to change is the consciousness where people begin to let go of their beliefs about people with handicaps, whatever you call it, challenges, etc., and see them for what they are, which is gifted and vibrant and capable and joyful. So let's take a look at Jared's handiwork. And for those of you who've seen it, that's my dog Emma. I haven't seen this movie since she passed away, by the way. People looked at Larry and they could see that he was sort of bedridden, and they thought, well, that's all he's capable of. He's an invalid. But I didn't believe that to be true. I thought that he was an invalid simply because he was confined to bed, not the other way around. Is it a warm day today, Larry? Yeah. Have you been outside yet? Yeah. Would you like to go outside? Yeah. Are you sure? It's a beautiful day. What would you like to say to Cousin Marilyn? Would you like to say, how are things in Boston?
When Larry Perlman was first born, he wasn't given much chance for survival. He was born with serious brain damage that affected his vision, his capability to move, and his speech. But he always had ways of defying the odds. Larry lived at the Therapeutic Living Center for the Blind for 40 years until his death on September 20th, 2015. As he grew older, Larry was provided fewer and fewer meaningful activities. Without reason or encouragement to get out of bed, he slept almost round the clock and was often hospitalized with infections as his immune system weakened. His cousin, Steve Puzarne, made it his mission to get Larry out of bed as much as possible. He introduced Larry to his dog, Emma, and music with a drum.
Beautiful. You and Larry are doing a duet.
Larry formed a very special connection with Emma. Things took a turn when Emma was no longer allowed to come to Larry's home. He was finally motivated to get out of his bed in order to see her. Another important milestone in Larry's transformation were the excursions that he made into the community. These helped to open his horizons and get him variety in life that we all need.
This was just one of many places that I would constantly be looking for to take Larry. What I observed with Larry, and I think this is true, is that his life was very limited. He rarely went out. Very few people came to visit him. And little by little, he deteriorated. But it wasn't just a physical deterioration. It was an emotional and spiritual deterioration. I think he was depressed. But I always believed that even if he couldn't see the beauty of a place like this, he could feel it. He could feel that the air was different than it was. And, you know, all of us know that being outdoors, just now we heard a bird and we can hear the wind through the trees. So I took a chance that if we began to do more normal things with Larry, he would begin to feel more like a normal person and he would begin to have more of a normal life. It was just one more piece of the puzzle, how to create a life of variety, a life of interest that would spark his internal interest, that would get his juices flowing, so to speak, and get him wanting to be out of that bed. Because if he wasn't up and around, I was concerned that he would get sick and die much younger than necessary.
Larry's favorite music came from the 60s band Peter, Paul, and Mary. A few months before he died, Larry had the pleasure of meeting Peter Yara himself.
To me, being with Larry was allowing me to stand up for what I believe is good and right, and was a really great gift to me. He had a kind of joy, an excitement about him that he was capable of conveying to me, that there was something in life that was really exciting him at that time.
Steve wanted to give Larry as many normal life experiences as possible.
Larry and I would sit and we would play some music together. And it was here that a real breakthrough took place. Larry had a big ball that we found here and did some physical therapy. Even though I'm not a physical therapist, I knew that Larry needed more physical activity so his body would not be so weak, and he wasn't receiving any. So I kind of took it on myself. And we just did an isometric exercise. Big ball, he would push hard, I would push back. He would push, I would push. And the amazing thing was, in the middle of that, he let out this kind of otherworldly sound that I had never heard from him before. It was like all of this emotion that was being brought up. And I knew that something extraordinary was happening. And it was a remarkable thing. It was that very day after that event that Larry got up out of his wheelchair and walked for the first time in years. And it was almost like he needed to get in touch with that energy that was being suppressed, that was being shut down. The grief, the depression had to be released before he could regain some of his physical strength.
Something Larry's loved ones thought was long overdue and maybe impossible was a bar mitzvah for him. With the help of Steve, Larry was able to have a bar mitzvah as a celebration for his 60th birthday. Steve trained Larry for months for this big day on December 27th, 2014.
After me. Ve'ata al te'atzvu. Ve'al yichar. Be'enechem. Ki ha'el va'agala uvizman kari. A few short months after Larry's magnificent bar mitzvah experience, we received some very sad news that he had cancer, and this would probably be one trial he would not overcome. But we were all so grateful that he had those 3 or 4 good years of returning to life, from moving from bedridden to bar mitzvah, and of experiencing the power of joy. As Helen Keller famously said, "Joy is the holy fire that keeps our purpose warm and our intelligence aglow." And for Larry, giving him things to be joyful about truly saved his life. We still here, everybody?
It's a very, very powerful film, I have to say. Very powerful and very, I mean, it's uplifting and upsetting at the same time. Because of,
Go ahead, sorry, go ahead, Suzanne.
no, just, the idea that he would have been left to just basically rot. I mean, it's just unconscionable. That's the part that is just so tragic.
Yes, and as I said, when I even broached the idea that he was entitled, that there was some and I have to tell you, my family who loved Larry, they would have been perfectly satisfied if I had just gone and sat by his bedside and played music. It's also quite a miraculous thing because when I started working with Larry, I didn't have a dog, right? And one day a picture of Emma showed up on my computer screen, and she was about to be given away, and there was no one to take care of her. And I couldn't let this dog be brought back to the pound where she'd been adopted years before. And it was one of those moments after I adopted her, I thought, well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do with Emma when I have to go see Larry? And kind of like the light bulb went out on, and I said, well, maybe there's something that Emma could do for him. Now you have to understand, Emma is not a trained therapy dog. So there was a lot of resistance, but I kind of snuck her in the back door. And I also have to say, Emma died about a year after Larry did of the very same thing. They both died of lymphoma. And Emma and I were so bonded because of what the experience that you saw in this movie brought up, we were bonded the way that a dog and a human might not normally be. And I've been grieving her loss for years, so much so that this is the first time I've watched the video since she died. And I guess the fact that I have 4 cats sitting next to me who I'm bonded with now helps a little bit. I'll show you pictures of that in a minute. But anyway, the first time I took Emma to Larry, I put her on his chest. Now, one of the things you need to know about Larry is that, like many people in this situation, he had a lot of rage inside of him. Not hard to understand. He was frustrated. People didn't understand him. They wrote him off. And there are times like when he would take my hand and hit it against, one time I wasn't paying attention, he grabbed my hand and smashed it against my forehead, or he would smash it against his own forehead. So I had to be so when I put Emma on Larry's chest, I watched both of them with an eagle eye, because I realized that Larry was so strong. It's so, when the rage would come up in him, a strength would be there, which you normally wouldn't expect. And she was only about a 20-pound dog. And I knew that if he were to take that dog and squeeze her the way he'd squeeze me, she would be dead. So I was ready at a moment's notice to literally pick her up, and save her from that fate. So I was watching. The opposite happened. He allowed that dog to melt. She was the first loving contact that he could connect with in literally since his parents had died. And something that I did not realize, one of the pictures of Larry's youth, did you guys notice there's a picture of an elderly gentleman? That's my grandpa Hoffman, Larry's grandpa Hoffman. And did you notice what Larry had in his arms when in that picture? There was a little beige dog whose name was Champagne. And I had completely forgotten that he had a dog. But when he held her, I suddenly remembered, oh my God, he had a dog when he was about 12 years old. And what I saw was that his muscle memory took over. All of the trauma, everything disappeared, and he was transported back to that time when he was holding his dog, Champagne. And he had never spoken about her. A few months after this incident, where he began to connect with Emma, he did speak about her. And, you talk about, negative things becoming positive. The people who ran the home told me that I could no longer bring Emma to see Larry, even though it was obvious to everyone that he was literally coming back to life. They said, well, she's not a trained therapy dog. The only thing you can do, you can bring her outside. You cannot bring her inside. Well, it turned out that was a Gamzula Tova Mulman, a moment something good happened. I came to Larry's bedside and I said to him, listen, cuz, I know that you love this dog, Emma, and Emma loves you, but I am telling you something right now. If you don't get out of that bed, you will never be able to see her again. I'm not the one. That's what they're telling me, that I cannot bring her here anymore. So if you want to continue to see that dog, you have got to get out of that bed. And in that moment, his legs swung off the bed. He got in the wheelchair, and that's the first time he had voluntarily gotten out of bed without being lifted in 2 years. 2 years. So we see the power of animals. We see the power, I say, of Hashem, who sent that. I have to tell you that after Emma passed away, I showed the movie to a dear friend she runs the Center for Sacred Studies up in Guerneville on the Russian River. And she said to me something that simultaneously brought a smile to my face and tears to my eyes. She said, you do know, by the way, that Emma was never really your dog. I said, what do you mean? She said, it's so clear to me, you were a vehicle. She was sent to you so you could bring her to Larry. And, I think that there were things going on that were, as my Rebbe would say, lamala min hateva, beyond the natural order of things. So that's the only commentary that I want to make about it. There are many people here who want to share. I would invite, let's open up the space a little bit to anyone who wants to comment on what they saw.
Well, I thought it was interesting when I saw his 60th birthday, because he didn't look 60 at all. He looked like he could have been 30 or 25 or something,
That was an interesting thing. And my brother, who is in the field, said in some respects, it's odd that even though these folks have a different kind of stress, they don't have the kind of worldly stress that most of us do. Larry did not have a gray hair on his head. When he died at 60 years old, his hair he was a redhead, which he had been his entire life. I wish I could say the same, not even close. Anyone else want to weigh in about what you saw or your impression of it? Anything that surprised you?
Well, one thing I just wanted to comment was how oftentimes how people with disabilities are often underestimated, and even the very institutions or systems kind of really limit them people at all, because there is these rules or regulations, not having the dog be able to come in, even with staff. Oh no, we don't want to move him because he's too fragile. It's very interesting that the very systems itself has to be changed.
To that I say amen. And I have to tell you that when they told me not that they didn't want me to help Larry get out of bed, I realized that someone in their organization had done a risk assessment, and realized that if Larry got out of bed and fell, they would be liable. Whereas if he simply died in his bed, they would not be. I want you to think about that. That it was, from a risk management point of view, it was safer for them to have him never move again. And you have to say that there are actually group homes that are worse than this one. And you wonder how much imprisonment, suffering, lack of potential is built into the system, exactly as Juan just mentioned.
Colin said, I miss Larry. He was a great guy.
By the way, did you see Colin in the movie?
I did.
Yeah, and Quinn was in the movie too.
Did you see Quinn?
Yep.
I just wanted to say something that's interesting about, the last few years of Larry's life. It's sort of like he actually spent a lot of years where he really wasn't living. It was almost like he was already dead. And so he actually got some years of life. And I think, it's like just lying there in bed, you might as well, maybe it's a bad thing to say, but you might as well be dead. So it really, I agree with everything else that's been said about these institutions. It's like, what's the point really of prolonging a life that isn't really a life? And so even if, and I know he died of cancer, so it had nothing to do with getting out of bed, but even had something he'd done in those 3 years led to him dying, sooner, even though I know it didn't, but I'm saying in some other circumstance, it's like, if someone has, 1 day or 1 week or 1 year of being able to really live, it's worth it to not spend all your days really not living at all.
And to take certain risks, measurable risks, and there were risks. I understood that. Let me also say this, at a point, as I said, Larry was going, this is such a testimony, and you could look at the medical records. Larry was transported to Northridge Hospital 4, 5, 6 times a month with one infection after another. And at some point, his doctor said to me, we've just about used every antibiotic we know of. And he said, there's going to come a point we just run out of options, right? When Larry got out of bed, he was never sick another day in his life until he got cancer, which is completely unrelated. For 2 years, he never went to the ER. Once he had a dog that he loved. Once he had Colin coming to visit him. I know Quinn came and played music for him. Once he had a reason to live, his immune system recovered, as bad as it was. And if you looked at the medical records, he never spent another day in the ER. How much more evidence do you need? But unfortunately, this was made possible because the person intervening, which was me, was a relative, and we had conservatorship. So no matter what the institution said, I didn't have conservatorship, but my brother, sister-in-law, and sister did. So they could say, Steve has the right to take him out. Steve has the right to do these things. And they understood that they really couldn't stop us because we were in charge. Plus the fact, because I had grown up with him, I had a vision of his wholeness. When he got up and walked for the first time, people were shocked. And you know why they were shocked? They actually thought he didn't have the capacity to walk because they had never seen him walk. It was a chicken and egg kind of thing. I mean, they looked at me like I was Jesus or something, like, oh my God, he's walking. I said, yeah, well, because he can, right? But again, this was a very unusual circumstance where we had the authority to lift him up, to take him away from that situation. But it's tragic to think how many people, because of the nature of the system, how many people don't have that option.
I'd like to share just a couple thoughts. So
introduce yourself, Christina.
Yeah, hi, my name is Christina. Sorry, I just want to pull this up. Cantorella, and I'm friends with Steve and many people on here. And thank you for, first of all, Suzanne, for having this platform and welcoming Steve and all of us here. Because I think that is the most important part, is having this conversation and talking about this and understanding, you know, all different point of views people are coming from. We all have different experiences that we go through. I'm a mom of Johnny, who is, right, actually that's my son Zach, but this is my son, sorry, Johnny, who is sleeping right now. Johnny just turned 23, and Johnny was born with a very rare genetic makeup. He has an extra part on one of his chromosomes, and part of how that presents itself is he is unable to speak with words. He has seizures, he has other health issues as well, and developmental challenges. But one of the biggest things is the communication that I've learned. And I want to just share a couple things. One with and I've seen this movie a few times, quite a bit actually, because it is just so profound to me. The impact that on many levels. One, the impact that Emma had on Larry, but the persistence and the creativity that Steve used to continue to, right? He saw in Larry what Larry needed, and that he didn't give up, that he tried to figure it out and tried to do whatever he could. And then also I want to give a shout out to Jared for just capturing such a beautiful film and beautiful moments and putting it together. So, and Colin and Quinn, who participated and were part of it as well. But one thing that came to me this time seeing it, Steve, you brought up that Larry took his hand and hit your head or hit his own head. And Johnny has taught me that, especially when you have limited use of language, of verbal language, that your behavior is their behavior, behavior is our communication. It's their way of communicating. And I had to stop and think about, you know, maybe Larry had a headache. Maybe Larry is trying, because Johnny will do that to me. He will put his hands on my ears like this when his ear hurts, and it's even knowing what I know with Johnny, when I see this, and I'm around a lot of people that have the same support needs that Larry and Johnny have. And for us to be able to take a moment and just see what it is that they're trying to tell us, and for us to be patient and to observe and to witness. And it's problem solving, but that's not a hard thing to do if we, you know, and it's important to collaborate and look at, talk to people who have been there. And you know, people like Johnny 30, 40 years ago and longer Johnny would be put in an institution, in a state-run institution. So yes, we've come, we've made improvements in the sense that there are no longer institutions, very few left in this in this country, in the state of California including. But we still, now it's, you know, in the community setting, in these group homes or residential facilities, but we still have a long ways to go. And all of our input matters. It is not just, don't think that if you don't have somebody with a disability in your life that you can't do anything or your input doesn't matter. It absolutely does. And there are regional centers throughout the state of California that help support people living in the communities. And it is important that there continues to be oversight and accountability. And I want everyone to know in March of 2023, there is a federal law that's called the CMS Final Rule. And it's through this home and community-based services. And basically what it is doing is it is making sure that people with, it doesn't matter what level of disability you have, it doesn't matter if you live in a residential facility or a nursing home or a group home, and it's applying to even elderly people, that we have, people have a more of a person, more involvement in what it is and the choice, more choice in what is happening in their lives. And I can give more information to people if they want. I'll put stuff in the chat. But I just want to encourage everybody, you know, the barriers, what Juan brought up as well, the barriers and the obstacles that are put in place for people with disabilities, they need to be broken down. They need to be looked at and not, and you know, I understand it's important what Steve shared earlier about the focus of fixing people, right? And I've done a lot of thinking about this because it is important to give this therapies, you know, to help people get to whatever their maximum potential is. However, our focus is so much on the deficits and the challenges and changing those and not building on the strengths and the gifts. And that gifted intern story that you shared, Steve, it's interesting that she was saying, oh, I have this gifted intern. But what about the gifted young man that they were studying? What about the gifts that he possesses? And even within our own self, right? We look at our faults. It's so easy for us to think of what we're lacking and what we need to improve on. But when we start to simultaneously look at the things that we're good at, look at, you know, every single human being has something to offer, has gifts to give. And when we start focusing on that, it doesn't mean that we're better or, you know, this form of ego, better, you know, being better than somebody else. It's just that we are good and we need to feel good about things. We need to build ourselves up. Even the challenges that we have, it doesn't mean we don't focus on improving ourselves, but start feeling the positive things that we have to offer. And with Larry, the testament of unconditional love. And that's what I take away from it every time. And that is something that we all have the capacity to give, and we all have the ability to receive that. And you don't have to buy anything. You could just say a word of kindness. You can just listen, and you never know the impact that it can have on other human beings and literally what it brings to their life. So thank you for letting me share that. And again, thank you for this platform.
Thank you, Christina.
I
Thank
see Ruth Geller has her hand up.
Yes, I would really like to thank you so much because you have brought something to everyone's attention. And I would like to say it is the most, well, not only moving, but true thing that you've done, Stephen and Christina. And I do want to share with you, I had a husband who injured himself and was in rehab. He was totally immobile, had to be lifted with a Hoyer lift, could not move without being lifted as you said, I was able to take him out, bring him home. He was able, had deficits for sure, had to have a lot of help with me there all the time. He was able to go out and walk around the block and talk, not much at all, but he was able, with the help of our wonderful Jewish community, to have Shabbos every Friday night and say the blessings, some of them, and every morning and every night. I just want to share with you that it is amazing. It is amazing.
Ruth, you did amazing work with him.
No,
right?
no,
Absolutely.
it was Arnie who was willing to try to cooperate as much as he could, but this was so moving, and it brought home all the stuff, and I was so grateful because this was a very fancy, one of the best residential, I mean, it has a 5-star rating as far as the kind of place it is, but you know, just could not, and this was before COVID, so people were able to visit there, but thank God he was home for more than 2 years and able to appreciate, share in holidays, eat at the dinner table with everyone. It was just amazing. So thank you very much. And Rabbi, thank you for sharing this again. It's the second time I've seen it, probably can see it a dozen times. And of course, it brings back how important it is to have an advocate.
Absolutely.
I would just like to say also, I would like to ditto all of the things that have been said. Rabbi, Cantor, Jared, Larry, thank you for the gift of this movie, and thank you for your gifts and all the work you do on behalf of everyone. I unfortunately have another Zoom meeting, so I must leave, but I thank you all for sharing, and shalom.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. I want to welcome our dear friends, one of my special Shabbat students, Salim Karam and his mother Vanessa. They live in Lakewood, and Salim has been. Let's say that Salim is one of the few people of our group who was not one of my bar mitzvah students. Johnny also was not. Johnny comes from a Catholic family. Salim is from the Islamic tradition, but we all participate as one group. And I think now I'd love to hear Salim and Vanessa talk about the importance to Salim of being able to go to the mosque and what that brings to him. Much as I had an opportunity to go to All Saints Church in Beverly Hills. And that was a place that Christina invited me to because of all the churches she had been to, they had a special way of allowing Johnny to be himself without worrying about being judged. And that is not an experience. I think Karen can speak to that as well. That is the exception, not the rule, unfortunately.
Oh,
Hi, and Rita and Benjamin are online as well. But let's look. Can I have Vanessa? Would you be willing or a little bit?
Yeah. Hi, Rabbi Suzanne. And
wait a minute. Somebody needs to, people need to mute themselves.
Oh, okay. Wait a minute. Okay,
There's a lot
sorry.
of noise going on. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Steve. And thanks for letting us participate in this. It's good. It's good to see our S5 friends here. So I've known Steve for about 15 years or so, originally because I participated in a visit to Israel and Palestine that he led, interfaith pilgrimage of peace. I think it was 2006 or so. And so my son Salim was very young, and then since then we've been friends, and then Salim just had this wonderful opportunity to participate in S5, Special Souls Sharing Sacred Song. And we're a very interreligious family. We are the Muslims in the group. We're a very interreligious family, and we like to experience and participate in many traditions. And actually, Salim, he can speak for himself now, but when he was younger, he had a lot of, he's on the autism spectrum, so he had a lot of challenges to learn how to communicate and to learn how to speak and everything else. But one thing I wanted to say, while it's still fresh in my mind after seeing the film about Larry, and is how important it is for in our relationships with anyone, but especially people with special needs, to come from the place of love and joy. That is so crucial. And whatever the person's disability is, if you've dealt with any of the institutions and structures, in my case, it's been public school and the famous IEP meetings, the advocacy is so important. The advocacy that only, you know, the family mostly brings to the table, which is, you know, to say, as you're sitting down and planning out all the things that they're going to try to help your child improve, or you're telling them the things that they need to help your child improve, always to begin from the place of, and you know, you have to prepare for this, the place of, these are my child's interests. This is what my child is good at. This is what my child loves to do. This is what this person, this is what brings joy to this person. This is who this person is, even to hold up a picture of them. This is who we're talking about. And to recognize that full human, which is just how, you know, and to me, that's a very religious, has a very religious aspect. You know, we're recognizing, you know, the breath of God, recognizing God in the other. That means everyone. And it's really important with our special needs people, because it's so easy for them to become, in a way, discarded, which is, I feel, what was happening with Larry. Even though maybe the home was, you know, going by the book and doing what they were supposed to do, they were failing him terribly. So thank God for our Cantor. He's made such a big difference in our lives, and Salim has had this wonderful experience to meet the other young men. They're not kids anymore, the young men. He participates in Shabbat. I hear him in the other room, you know, saying the prayers in Hebrew. It's very impressive. And just connecting in a way, even during the pandemic, or especially during the pandemic, that wouldn't be there for him. And so we're not just, you know, we're not just helping or supporting people with special needs. We're bringing people of different faiths together, and we're learning from each other. And I benefit from that just as much as Salim does. But Salim, maybe he wants to say so. What was the question, Steve?
Well, I know that Salim enjoys going to the mosque, and most of the families here have talked about when they finally found a place to worship, that it was more welcoming, that their sons or daughters, that it transformed. And what I sometimes say is that those amongst us who need spiritual inclusion the most get it the least. And you know, I would take Larry to a place that had a full orchestra, and the reason I did that is that so people wouldn't hear the fact that Larry made sounds. He just did. And I knew if there was a band playing, they wouldn't hear him, but I was always kind of on pins and needles because I didn't want him to disrupt the service. And that's a big challenge for the Jewish community, is how to be fully inclusive so that the worship, and there's a long debate whether we should have special services for special needs people or find a way to include them in the typical services. I don't have an answer to that, but there is no question we can do a better job. There's been a lot of effort made to build special ramps for people with physical disabilities, but for people with emotional and cognitive challenges, less so. So Salim, if you could speak a little bit about what you enjoy about going to the mosque and praying there.
Of course. So, a mosque is yeah, we would mostly go to mosques every end of Ramadan, Eid al. Yeah, at the end of Ramadan, it's called Eid. Yeah, we would don't know how to explain this. I apologize.
Celine, just say what you like about it. You don't have to explain what it is. Just say what you like about it.
Your own experience, Salim.
Whenever we go to the mosque, the imam, which is an Islamic priest, would give explanation on the imam explain what is currently going on in the world and would encourage us to work together, and he would encourage us to work together to bring peace to the world.
And Salim, what does everyone do together during the mosque service that you like to do? What does everyone all do together at the same time?
At the same time?
Does everyone stand up and do something together?
Pretty much. And for the standing up part, we only stand up when we begin our prayers at the mosque.
Prayer, that's the part you enjoy, right? Where everyone prays together. And that's only happens in the mosque, right?
Yep. As we pray towards the east.
Which we do too.
And people who've seen how Muslims pray in the mosque know that they all go through ritual prayer together, doing the same movements, standing, bowing, kneeling, and prostrating. And so that's a communal experience that if people with disabilities are not included, they never get to have that experience. And it's very powerful. So, right, Salim?
It is.
Yeah.
Well, I know that during our times together, we have, in addition to our meditation and our blessings and our prayers and our singing, we have an opportunity to discuss. And I count on Salim teaching us about Islam because he knows a great deal and many of us don't. And I've just been astonished at how well Salim has been able to be my teacher. And I always comment that in Hebrew, the word to teach and the word to learn are the same, Lamed Mem Daled. My Rebbe used to say that teaching is just a slightly more intensive form of learning. And I learned as a teacher long ago, if I don't learn as much from my students as I impart, that I'm not doing my job. So thank you, Salim, for saying that. Karen, would you want to say a few words about your experience with, and also Rita? Karen, if you want to just, maybe Colin can talk about his bar mitzvah.
Well, what Colin has said was that he's really enjoyed I think it's about all of his whole experience working with you, that he's really enjoyed the music, culture, and meditation, and that it's helped him through stressful times in his life. And I know that what I would add is that there's very little that's more stressful than going to school every day and having teachers, teach you things based on what they perceive you can understand. And autism has a lot to do with communication barriers. And here someone can go through the school system and they come to school enthusiastic every day, but the way that they're taught, gets to be very heavy, just heavy, like a burden to feel every day. And I can tell you that with Colin's bar mitzvah beginning, actually, one thing that Steve pointed out when Colin started his bar mitzvah training was that he's found that working with students that as they're learning and preparing for their bar mitzvah, that the other difficult behaviors tend to be helped as well. And I think it's because it's training for the bar mitzvah, the whole experience, and the way that Steve interacts with Colin, it speaks to the whole person. I know that he started out having behavior setbacks, but at the same time at home, he was singing, he was chanting everything, he was learning very quickly. And eventually he got to do that more and more with Steve, and it became therapeutic. And also Steve would talk to him, he would talk to him with respect. And, he could feel that. It made a huge impact. And I can tell you during the pandemic that having Steve on Zoom and the other S5 participants has been like a lifeline. And in a situation where there's good reason for panic at times, Steve's reminded him and the others that it's the present, that we should try to be in the present, that the present is a gift. And they would do meditation, which was extremely helpful for Colin. I think that helped him to deal with stress as well.
And of course, part of it is because I always had very high expectations, higher than other people. But what I'd like to do now, let's see, I'm sharing my screen. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yeah, we can see it.
Quinn, could you help lead this? We recognize that there's always time delays, but my S5 students know the song, and I'm going to play it on my Native American flute. This is a piece of music that I learned at a demonstration down at Alvera Street, the church down there. And then I wrote the second verse out of my experience of working. And it's based on this teaching. Everything on the earth has a purpose, every disease and herb to cure it, and every person a mission. This is the Indian theory of existence. And right around the time I found that, I wrote these words: to every person there is a purpose, to every person a gift to give. All God's creations, they are a blessing. They teach the lessons we need to live. If any of my students have a drum nearby or anything like that, Quinn, do you have your guitar at the ready?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to start. Take it, Quinn.
Every tribe, and every nation, from every people and every tongue, from every corner of the whole creation, comes a new song that must be sung. To every person, there is a purpose. To every person, a gift to give. All God's creations, they are a every person a gift to give. All God's creations, they are a blessing. They teach the lessons we need to live. They teach the lessons we need to live.
Thank you, Quinn. And that is one of the theme songs of S5 and Vision of Wholeness. And I'd just like to see if Rita and Ben would like to say a few words. You still with us?
Yes,
Yeah.
I would like to say a few words if I can, okay? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Obviously, I don't want to repeat all the wonderful things that everyone else has said, but every one of them I would underscore is absolutely our feeling.
Yeah.
No question, Karen, if it weren't for you and Colin, I wouldn't have known about Steve, and Benjamin would not have had the high point of his life, his bar mitzvah, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
But what
Yeah.
I just want to say that I think is different from, or new at least, is really also a thank you to Jared and Steve for the movie, because I'm a psychologist who's worked with the area of disabilities for over 50 years, 55, and I've worked at the regional centers ever since I've been in California, so that's about 20 years. And for most of that time, I've been the person who gives at either Harbor Regional Center or at West Side Regional, well, no, at Harbor, when I was at Harbor. So for about 15 years, I did the training that every one of the new counselors had to have in various disabilities and various issues, and I did intellectual disabilities. And so I was a lady for that. And for years, I used fantastic footage that I had from Benjamin, which was incredibly good because I could follow him through his life. But one of the main themes of all of my little lectures was, I used to call it SOS, stimulation, opportunity, and support. That everybody had to have, every person in general needs to have it, but certainly people with disabilities. And if they don't, well, you know the story. That's what Jared's movie is all about. I mean, if you don't have that, it's just deteriorate. If you do, you can bring out whatever potential the person has. So when I got Jared's movie, I started my lecture by saying, well, I can show you this movie, and if you get it, you can go home, because there's nothing else I have to say. Nothing shows it more fantastically how much not having stimulation, not having opportunity, and not having support, but what it can lead to, and the difference when you get it. So it's a work of art, and it's an incredible teaching tool, which I have used over and over again. And I thank you very, very much for providing it. And I just want to add something that Christina said, because this is something that's also learned a great deal about in all my years of working in this field. Stimulation doesn't mean any old stimulation. It has to pick up from what you find in that person to begin with. For many years, I worked on a fellowship in New York City with severely cerebral palsy, quadriplegic young people who at the time were all considered to be profoundly retarded because they didn't have any other way of finding out what was going on with them. And so they would sit these poor kids in their wheelchairs in front of a mobile and twirl the mobile around in front of them, and then that was considered stimulation. Instead of trying to find what in that particular person is their unique, what they have, what they can offer, because everybody can, as Christina said, and pick up on that and let it and develop it, give it opportunity and give it support. And we all know, all of us as parents in this group right here know what fantastic things we end up getting from our kids. And with someone like Steve supporting us, we're very, very lucky. That's all. Thank you all. Take care.
Dan?
Can't say anything.
I'm here.
Good to see you. Ben is the most uplifting human being that I've ever met. When I would drive hours to get to his lesson, Ben was always standing right at the curb waiting for me. And as good as I felt after being in traffic for 2 hours, he immediately lifted my spirits.
Yeah.
Because he has the most positive outlook. Now, Ben, how old were you when you had your bar mitzvah? Do you remember?
47.
47.
Okay, and is there anything you'd like to say about your experience of having a bar mitzvah? What did you like?
I think he froze.
Oh.
Oh,
there he is.
It was great.
Yeah.
See, that's something which I can't believe how true it was, that Benjamin would end up speaking much better in Hebrew than he did in English. And boy, was that true, because he managed, most of the time I have to yell at him for mumbling and blah, 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 blah. And he got up there and he did his speech and he said every single one of those words of those songs with complete clarity, which was really incredible.
Yeah.
Which I remind him all the time. I say, put on your bar mitzvah speech, your bar mitzvah way of talking, which is to be, because those were all unknown words that he couldn't just slur over with the expectation that everybody would have understood him. And here he had to really work to make sure that he was understood. And he can do it.
I can do it.
Okay.
And after that experience, Rita, I read a study that said that they've actually had great results having people say words that they don't understand.
Right, exactly.
Rely on bad habits.
Exactly true.
It's harder. It's quite astounding.
It's amazing. It was quite a phenomenon. I couldn't believe it myself. It really was incredible.
Yeah. And
so,
I just want
thank you for that, and thank you for
everything. If there's any doubt about what a gift all of you have been to me, I could write volumes, but I am sure you know. What I'd like to do is just talk a little bit about the future. We're coming up on 9:30. We still have lots of folks. Anybody else want to say anything? I want to show a little video of what our vision is long term. Anyone else want to say anything? Rabbi Singer, anybody?
I just really, really appreciate the fact that you have done this incredible work. And it sounds like everybody that has spoken here has also done amazing work with their own children, with other adults, and, gratitude, total gratitude for, what you've done. Did you have your hand raised, Kathy? Is that?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a little, and maybe Quinn does as well. I don't know, but Quinn, met Steve when he was 11, and now he's 28. So they've had 17 years now of working together, which is amazing. And I think Steve really helped Quinn find some of his special talents. I don't know if you want to talk about how the impact that working with Steve had on you.
Well, I would say it was a pretty good experience.
And what did he help you learn about yourself, about some talents that you have? What are you really good at that Steve helped you discover?
Music.
And what else?
I don't know what else.
What about reading Torah?
Oh, yeah.
How about chanting Torah, Quinn?
Yeah, that's what I wanted him to talk about. Can you talk a little bit about chanting Torah?
Well, I didn't know I had that experience until my bar mitzvah.
Yeah, so Quinn is I don't know, Steve can talk about it better than me because I don't really know that much about it, but an incredible Torah chanter, which he would have never known had Steve not introduced him to that. And Torah trope is something that just really somehow came naturally to him, and he learned it really quickly, and he's incredible at it.
Yeah, Quinn is invited by Craig Taubman every year to the Pico Union Project, and he chants the high holiday Torah portions with the correct trope. Even though I consider myself quite a good musician, the truth be told, I don't have a memory. I don't have the memory for Torah chanting. So I was always so grateful to have Quinn around, because Quinn has he has a photographic memory. He can memorize sections of Torah in a couple hours that would take me a month, and he already had it better than I did. And many times he would chant it with nothing in front of him, no Torah, no paper. It's just there. This is just an uncanny ability, because it's not that it's difficult for most of us to do it. And again, we didn't know, but it was just in the process. And Quinn has become such a great song leader, and you know, there's so many things that came out of that. And as I said, we're hoping, and this is going to take us to the next phase. I just want to introduce this. When Rabbi Singer read my introduction, she talked about why I'm in Israel, and I am in Israel. And I came here, at least in part, I was led to be here because I became aware that Israel is at the forefront of providing alternatives to the type of group home that Larry suffered under. And they have 20 years of experience doing what many parents would like to create, particularly Christina, for their kids back in the States. And knowing that it's been done, and I have to tell you, there were people who were very doubtful that it could succeed, but it did succeed. And I would like to show a video kind of in closing, just a 2-minute, if I can get it up on the screen. And then what I would like to do is invite all of you, if you would be so kind, I'm going to ask Quinn to lead the Misha Barak prayer for my brother, who has undergone 3 surgeries in 3 weeks. And he's really not in good shape. And Quinn leads that beautifully. And if we record it, I'll send him a copy. But let me see if I can get this on screen. All right, this is a movie about Kfar Tikva, which is about 10 minutes from here.
In a place where old dreams unite with true passion and aspirations for excellence, only great things can be created. This is true for all art forms, but is especially relevant to the art of creating wine. In the year 2003, the Itzhaki family fulfilled their dream and established a beautiful winery that integrates quality wine production with social responsibility.
Since the beginning, I had in my mind, in general, 3 main goals. First, to produce the top quality wines, and second, to sell those quality wines in a reasonable price. The third goal was to contribute with the community to help the community.
Tulip Winery has established itself among the elite of Israel's wineries. Word of Tulip wines spread abroad, and the winery won international awards, as well as sensational reviews.
We are trying to excite ourselves all the time here in the winery. This is why we try to make new and innovative blends each year. We try to give the grapes the best equipment that we can get, so we can have the best wines that we can make.
Tulip is located in Kfar Tikva, Village of Hope, a small community designed especially for adults with developmental and emotional disabilities. Kfar Tikva enables members of the community to develop and realize their potential. This wonderful synthesis of the community's vision and the Itzhaki family's desire to produce quality wine has given life to an exciting model for the wine industry, employing community members and offering them the opportunity to integrate into the workforce, just as in mainstream society.
My lives in the village very good. It's very nice. People here, my jobs, I put bottles in the machine. I clean in the visitor center, hosting people, and I make boxes, packaging the holiday.
The jobs at Tulip Winery are some of the most prestigious and desirable jobs for the Kfar Tikva residents. In addition to a great work environment, the residents earn the bragging rights to say that they work in one of Israel's premier and prestigious boutique wineries. And how can that not have a positive impact on their lives?
For me, working in the winery is seeing the friends from the Village of Hope each morning with a smile on their face, making new and exciting blends each day. It's a home away from home. It's a family.
Tulip Winery for me is to make dreams come true, but not only for myself, because if you do good things will happen to you.
Tulip wines have a spirit, a soul, a bouquet, and a flavor like no other wine, because you cannot compete with a dream.
So it's Kfar Tikva. I went there a few weeks ago because a friend of mine asked me to bring some wine for Shabbat. And it's only about 15 minutes from where I live. And it's also worth noting to the other direction is Kibbutz Kishorit. And they also have 300 people living there. And they make wine there too. Apparently it's a wonderful combination. So these are two models of, and it's not that we necessarily have to build that, but what these examples tell us is it demonstrates there's a level of capability that is not being tapped in the group home setting. And the Kibbutz Kishoret was started by someone who was offered a group home in Netanya. And he said, no, I'm not working in any more group homes. We're going to build a kibbutz. So we have the dream we've created together the Sacred Bridge. And my goal is to start, as Rabbi Singer said, allowing special needs people to come here and meet up with these folks here and to learn from their experience and to begin to use our resources in the States, because if we can do it in Israel, we can do it everywhere. Would you agree with that, Christina? Still there?
Yes, I am here. I was just helping Johnny woke up. So
okay, no problem. We're reaching an end, and we're going to sing the Misha Berach.
Yeah.
Anyone want to make any last comments before we go? Christina, you want to say anything about the Kfar Tikva?
Yeah, I just wanted to share. So that is what Steve had mentioned. That's what we're hoping to. Johnny, can you say hello? Say hi to everyone.
Hi, Johnny. Good morning. Well, is it morning? Yeah, good morning. It is morning.
Morning. And that is what we're working towards, right? Is creating this this community. Really, it's a community of interdependence. It's not our focus so much is on independence, and I think we need to start to change our focus on interdependence and our interconnectedness, and that will create a community that is that embraces people with all abilities the way that they are, not trying to change, but to embrace. And I want to say something that Rita had mentioned about looking at everyone's gifts. Sometimes we think that they have to have this profound thing that they can do. And it's a lot of times, even within the challenges that they have, we can create, their gifts are within that challenge. Johnny loves to sharpen pencils, and he does it as a stimming behavior. And a lot of people would think like that's something that needs to change. We need to stop him from doing this. He'll move his hands. Well, we took all of the thousands of pencils that he had sharpened over the years. He sharpens them to about here. And we took the sharpenings, which we would discard, and they were all over our home and making a mess. And we brought it to his school with his neurotypical peers that did not have disabilities, and it sparked in them creativity that no one could ever imagine. And they created things, and I'll just show you. They came up with these ideas of what they could create, these beautiful pieces of art with pencils. It's like a little ornament that they had. They came up with this wreath with his pencils, this beautiful wreath.
That's great.
And it sparked in creativity with somebody else's, challenges or behavior that I easily could have, tried to get him to get rid of. I embraced it, and I, encourage all of us that when we see people that we think they may have challenges that might need to be changed, let's look at what is their interest, what they love to do, what things that they when we're developing this community. And it's really, really, really important that we have people with lived experiences, people with disabilities that are involved in the creation of what it is that we're doing. And I'm so grateful. I didn't get to speak. I was speaking about Larry's movie, but I didn't get to speak much about S5 and the platform that Steve has created, and just being with all of, people of all faiths and all walks of life. And I love that you brought up the conversation. I think we should have this explore this at a later time, but how do we include people who do make different noises, who make different sounds? It is, Vanessa said, the importance of the community of prayer, of people being together in a physical space, how much that means to all of us. And there's some really interesting things that I think we'll be talking about in the future. And anyone who's interested in wanting to be part of our development team of what we're going to be creating here in the States, please reach out to Steve, myself. I'll my information in the chat. We would love to have, anybody who's interested in wanting to just have input into what we're doing, be part of this. So thank you again to all of you. And yeah, thank you to Steve and Suzanne for giving us this platform.
Thanks, Christina.
So before we sing Misha Barak for my brother, any Rabbi Singer, you would just want to say any kind of sign us off?
I would like to just thank you so very, very much for this really important program, which we're going to make available on our YouTube channel. And I'll also give you the link to it, because I think it just brings up so many important points. I mean, there's so many, but one of them is to, start from the blessings and wonderful assets that people have, as opposed to what their deficits are, since we all have deficits, and just seeing people flourish and flower, and it's just wonderful. And I hope that you are able to bring the Israeli model here, because obviously our model here is pretty broken. So thank you so much to you and all the families that were here today, and hope that this work will spread far and wide. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. And, Gamzula Tov means that even in adversity, we try to find something good. And I would never want to say anything was good about this pandemic, because it was a disaster on every level. And yet, what is also true is that if I were in town and I went to the temple in Riverside, I would not have all my families here sharing with you. I've learned so much more about my students in some respects through these Zoom sessions, because, as I said, many times by the time I'd get to my session, I would have been sitting in traffic for 2 hours, right, and I wasn't in the best space. Here, I'm just surrounded by my 4 kitties, and I'm just here. So thank you, Sam. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And thanks for the work you do. What's the name of your group, Sam?
There's an organization called Friday Night Out, and we meet every Friday from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. And if anybody has a kid with disability or not a kid with disability, we meet via Zoom, and we have like 55 people join, and they give out free gift cards and free pizza dinner, and we dance and have a ton of fun.
And Christina runs Friday night. She calls it the happiest hour. I'm assuming if there are different links and so forth we want to put up, we can put that up on the Bethel site.
Sure. Just send them to me, and we'll include them in the weekly email. And,
awesome.
And on our website, we can do that too.
We definitely are going to be starting the Gesher HaKodesh, the Sacred Bridge work, to try to facilitate people with challenges coming to visit Israel, Palestine. And anybody who has an interest in helping, volunteer, donate, getting other people involved, we're going to need, I'm kind of out here floating on my own here in Israel, so I need a lot of support from my folks back in the States. And so we'll send some information on to you, Suzanne, and we'll maybe you can just post it.
Sure.
So Quinn, are you ready?
Yep.
thank you. I want to ask all of these holy people who are with us tonight. Well, it's tonight. I keep saying tonight, this morning by you, to send your healing blessings to my brother, Chaim Baruch, Alan Bruce Puzarne, who is struggling to regain his strength after 3 very grueling surgeries. I want to give my thanks and gratitude and praise to the skilled surgeons who did amazing work, but the journey is a long one, and he's going to need all of the healing blessings that we can bring to him. And I want to thank Debbie Friedman of blessed memory, who her Yortzeit is right around now. I believe she passed in late January or early February. And she transformed Jewish worship by giving people a sense that prayer mattered, and that by saying the names of people who need our prayers, it helped us and it helped them. So before Quinn sings, I want to invite anybody else who wants to recite a name, as we often do, for the healing prayer called the Misha Berach.
Cindy Luby. Miss Parsley.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Quinn.
Beginning.